So here we are talking about the Z6. I'm going to just, there we go. Yeah, I'm just going to keep going. So when you pull out a Z6 from the box, by default, your autofocus modes are set to the function 2 button, which is down here. Now, when you grip the camera, your ring finger is where function 2 is. The reason that I'm talking about that before anything else is because when I first pull a camera out of the box, the first thing that I do is I change the autofocus mode. So I will change AFA, which is complete automatic, camera decides everything for you. I will switch that over to AFS, which is single servo, and with a single point in the middle, because I quite like to focus and then recompose. I prefer to have a little bit more control over what I'm doing, and I don't like the camera to decide the focus points for me. So that's why I decided to pick that as the first point we talk about when we're talking about taking a Z6 out of the box. So when you push the function 2 button, as with all Nikon's current DSLRs, your back wheel controls your main subject. So this is the main command dial. And your front wheel is a secondary command dial. So just as you use the back wheel for shutter speed and the front wheel for aperture, you also, every menu has a kind of back wheel and a front wheel function. So when you're pushing the autofocus selection, let me extend the lens out so that you can see what I'm doing here. Right, so I'm going to push function 2, there you go, and you see up the top there it says AFS. Now if I move that back wheel, it will let me switch between AFS, AFC, and manual focus. Let's say I'm in AFC and I would like to choose a smaller area. The Zs are a bit different to DSLRs in that you don't have dynamic areas in the same way as you do with an SLR camera. What you have instead is a wide focus area, a sort of normal, and then a small, and then you have a tiny little pinpoint. The pinpoint is a bit too small for usefulness unless you're doing very, very fine focusing. But the small area is probably, because of the number of points that these cameras have, the small area is the equivalent of about 9 AF points. So just very quickly to cover what we've gone over so far, if you're looking at buying a mirrorless camera and you're sitting at home looking at your computer and reading endless articles, I thought I would just show you the differences between a DSLR in terms of controls. Or if you're used to using compact cameras and you're thinking of upgrading to one of these and you are a little bit put off by the number of controls and buttons on them, because there are a lot of functions, then I thought I'd just very, very quickly show you what to look for. We have some comments. So Ramachandra has a question. CF Express cards, recently firmware has been released to support it. Okay, so in terms of, has it made any difference in terms of buffering? The quick answer to that is that CF Express cards are, at the moment, off the top of my head, about 4 times faster than XQD cards. And that will make a difference in the long run, particularly if you're using a Z6, because of the frame rate of the Z6. I imagine it will make a difference for a Z7 as well, but we haven't actually gotten CF Express cards in stock yet. Our suppliers have just started releasing them. So we're looking forward to getting those and testing them out. The buffer at the moment looks to not be any different, but I reckon when we put the CF Express cards in there, it will definitely get faster. So I'll do another video on that when the CF Express cards come out, and we might do it as a full-on video on our YouTube channel. But thank you for your question. Please feel free to ask me any questions about the Z6 and Z7 if you're watching. In the meantime, I'm going to just recap. So if you're looking at changing from a DSLR or a compact system camera to a Z6 or Z7, I'm just going to go over some of the key differences of the controls and what you can do to get your settings very similar to what you're used to on a DSLR. The main things that are different are where the autofocus modes are located and how those work, because that is an entirely different setup, and also just customizing the eye menu. So now the eye menu is this button located here on the back of the camera. So this appears on DSLRs as well. And in DSLRs, we haven't used it nearly as much as you need to use it in a Z camera. I just took a photo, so it's a touch screen, you've got to get used to that. So just to cover the basics, your front wheel and your back wheel. So your back wheel is here, and that normally controls your shutter speed. It's also what they call the main command dial. Then the front wheel, which normally controls your aperture, is called the sub command dial. Now, normally what happens is you push a button and then the back wheel changes the main function, and then the front wheel gives you secondary levels of function. That's more important than ever in the Z6 and Z7 because the buttons on the outside aren't as comprehensive as they are with the DSLR. And I will explain why. So first thing I'm going to show you is autofocus points, because that's what's vastly different between the two. The other settings aren't hugely different, but they're just in different places. So the big one is this function 2 button here. So I've talked about it about 3 times now. If you've been watching since the beginning, I apologize. I'll get over this in a second. So function 2, which is where your ring finger sits when you're holding the grip of the camera, that changes your autofocus points. So now I'm going to show you the back of the camera, and I'm pushing function 2, and you can see there it says AFC. Now, if I move my back wheel, it allows me to change from AFS to AFC to manual focus. So in AFS and AFC, I've also got the option to change the number of points. You can see the sort of red brackets around there. Now, if not very ergonomic, but if I use the front wheel, it will allow me to change the focus area. So you see that little rectangle there? That's what they call wide, small, and wide, large. And then you've got the sort of tiny point. That's pinpoint. This is small. This is pinpoint. This is wide, small, which is probably the equivalent of about maybe 25 AF points, or maybe 50, maybe 39. This one is slightly larger. Considering that there's an astronomical number of AF points on this camera, you have to bear in mind that it's very different to a DSLR. And then that's the sort of all-encompassing area, and it's now spotted my face now that I was pushing down on it so that it could track my face. I'll show you about AFF and AF face detection in just a moment. So that's an AFS. The principle is the same in AFC. So you push that button, your back wheel changes between AFS and AFC and manual focus, and your front wheel changes the area or the size of or portion of the frame that the camera's going to focus on. If, like me, you prefer to have a very small area of focus, then you would probably select AFS with not the pinpoint, because that's a little bit too small, but the next one up, which is just the small. I'm going to show you how to do that. So I'm pushing the function 2 button. I've got it in AFS at the moment, and I'm just going to use the front wheel there, not pin, but the next one along, that one. There's probably about 9 AF points in that point, to be honest, if you broke it down. But that's about the right size for most subjects. When it comes to face tracking, there's 2 ways that you can adjust your face tracking. Let me get this camera aligned here. Right, so if I'm in, let me pop it into AFC. So again, function 2 button, and then the back wheel to AFC. Now, let's get me in the right setting here. So let's say, if I want face tracking to work, I need to use this here. You see this? And it's tracked my eye automatically. Now, that's using what they call the wide area. So where the little red brackets are just in the corners. And then once it spots my face, it automatically locks on. If I didn't want it to track my face and I wanted it to track good old Clint Eastwood's face in the back there, it's going to be very difficult to do while I'm holding it in front of a camera, but I would actually just have to tap his face. Actually, I'm going to just tap over there, and then you can see I've got it set to take a picture. But pressing OK, let's turn that off. Delete that later. Pressing OK, so pressing OK resets the point of contrast that I want to use. So let's say I line that up there, and that's what I want. Then now, when I move, it's tracking my eyeball. Now let's say I don't want it to do that anymore. I want it to go and track Clint. So I'm going to press OK again. And now it's going to track Clint eastward. So if you have any questions about that or anything else, let us know. Just send them over in the comments. I'm going to periodically check the comments. Howdy from Texas. Well, howdy from London. And if you have any specific questions about those functions, I'm going to move on from the AF functionality now, but feel free to just ask me to recap and I can do that. So that's how you set your AF points. It is the first thing that comes up when people buy a Z6 from me, usually, or a Z7. Usually they get the Z camera out and then they go, oh, I don't understand where the focus points are because there's no little AF button on the side. It's actually buried in there. The lenses also have an auto and manual switch, but that literally just changes you from manual focus to autofocus. So all of the little customizable nitty gritty bits are buried in function 2. Now, yeah, do I have to ask that right now? Later. I did. I got it. Oh, I got another one. Another question. With additional battery grip, how many compressed loss raw shots can be taken on a single charge? Okay, so the battery grip doesn't actually make any difference to the quantity of lossless raw shots that you can take on a single charge, from what I've been told by Nikon School. I will do a little test now if my lovely assistant wouldn't mind getting me an MBN10 from the cupboard over there, and an ENEL15. Then I'll pop it all together and you can see. I'll come to that in a second. So I've covered the autofocus points. If you've been looking at the Zs, you've probably already seen this top dial here. So this top dial is kind of a simplified version to what we're used to with DSLRs. You've got manual, aperture, shutter priority, and thank you. And then you've got, now, what a lot of people like to ignore is the green auto button. That is complete automatic. If you're moving from a compact camera, so any of the Coolpix range or anything that is fundamentally a point and shoot, then green auto camera there, that is your mode. That is the mode that you would automatically start with. And everything down to your focusing is completely out of your hands. The camera goes, I'm going to make decisions for you. So, so that's the mode that you use. But if you are used to using a DSLR, then obviously manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and program are all effectively the same as you would expect on a DSLR camera. The other thing you'll see is that there are 3 user menus. You've got U1, U2, and U3. The thing that I love about the user menus, unlike the custom settings banks that you get with the DSLRs, with some of the pro bodies like the D4s, D5s, D850s, etc., having U1 and U2 and U3 in this case means that you can literally decide down to your favorite aperture and shutter speed, as well as your shooting quality, your white balance, what picture control you use, what mode you normally start in, if you normally start in shutter priority. All of those little tiny settings can be programmed into any one of those 3 user functions. And the good thing about that is that if you turn the camera off and then turn it back on again, it always defaults to what you saved it as. Whereas with the custom banks, once you make a change, it's gone. I mean, you can't remember what your original settings are. It used to drive me nuts with the D700. I was forever setting my custom banks up and then changing something and forgetting what I changed. So U1, U2, and U3 get around that, and you've got 3 options. A lot of the DSLRs only have 2 user menus. This has 3, and you can set those up in the setup menu, which is the little spanner icon on the back. So if you really want just to, when you sit down with your Z6 or Z7 for the first time and you just want to program in, okay, my U1 is for landscape and my U2 is for sports and my U3 is for portrait. And then you can select your favorite aperture, shutter speed, mode, white balance, quality, picture control, you name it, and you can stick it all into one of those. And then you can do the same for the next one and the same for the next one. So I think those are super handy. Moving on to, we have another comment. I don't know how I can answer that question. What camera manufacturer is going to go bust with the economic collapse? Olympus, Nikon? Well,
Speculate.
I hope none of them, to be honest, because that would make life very boring. Could you imagine if there was only 1 or 2 camera brands available? And also, I don't think it's down to camera brands going bust particularly. Maybe things will scale down. Maybe production will scale down for a bit. Certainly, you know, some of the more obscure items that are made in China and in the factories over there are harder to get hold of at the moment. But I don't think they're going to disappear off the face of the planet. There's enough demand, let's face it, there's enough photographers out there that that camera brands will keep going. As far as we know, everyone's carrying on business as usual as much as they can. A lot of the admin staff are working at home. We're here. Look, I'm in my office. So, and the staff are all in the shop, and we're picking up the phones and answering emails. So I don't think that's any different anywhere else. You never know what tomorrow may bring, but hopefully that will answer your question to some degree. It's my speculation. Right, so I'm going to do a little test here as our lovely Rocha Ramachandra asked me to do. So to put the MB-N10 on, as you can see, it's the old style, kind of like the MBD 200s and the MBD 80s, where you actually have to take the battery compartment off the camera and then put the grip on. So I'm going to just first take out the battery. It's a 15B. I'm going to take off the door. Hopefully you can see that. And then very cleverly, and thank goodness, there is a hole. Can't do it back to front, but there you go. There's a place to put your battery door so you don't lose it. And then that just slots in there. And whack that on. And let's put the batteries in. So first of all, with a single battery, let's see how many shots we can get. So at the moment in the buffer it says I've got 15 shots. What am I shooting on? Not a particularly fast card. Let's find something a bit faster. There we go. That's a fast card. Same number of shots in the buffer. Let's make sure that we're on. So I'm going to just briefly talk to you about the I menu here. The I menu, as you can see, has all of the settings that we're used to changing, like your quality, your white balance. When it comes to JPEGs, there's also different levels of compression now. You don't just have basic, normal and fine. You've got a sort of high compression and low compression version of each. All of that stuff was actually still accessible in DSLRs, but it was buried in the shooting menu. So with the Zeds now, it's actually just kind of at your fingertips, which is quite cool. So we've got all of those settings. You've also got, I mean, you can change this as much as you like. That's one of the beauties of this menu, is that you can literally pick and choose. If you never use Bluetooth, for example, you can turn that off here. If you never use picture controls, you can turn that off. You've got white balance, metering mode. You've got the VR on or off option there. You can also access your autofocus modes. I'm pretty sure that this is our demo Z6, and I'm pretty sure that it's basically as it was out of the box, except for the few tweaks that we've done to it. So you can change that as much as you want. Now, let's just have a look at the quality quickly. So menus are much the same. Sorry, doing it backwards is much harder than it looks. So we're on, let's get it out of the movie shooting menu and pop it onto the photo shooting menu. So our NEF recording there, 14-bit lossless compressed. Okay, good. That's what we want. So if I'm now going to shoot now, someone has changed some settings. I can see that here. So let's change our release mode. Release mode is accessed by this button here. When you push and hold that. Now, this is another one of those where you have to then choose, you can choose option 1 and option 2. So your back wheel will choose your continuous high or low, and your front wheel will choose how many frames per second you want. So let's plop it onto high, which on this one, oh, that's not very high. What's it doing? Oh, let me just pop it onto manual actually, and then I can just, doesn't sound very high, does it? Continuous high extended, which is That's a lot. That's more than 15. So that burst there was about 40 shots. It was probably doing 40 shots and it hadn't filled up yet. So let's just see if that will work. U1, U3. So I have a comment from John here. Does U1, etc. remember the manual focus setting? It does if you haven't got it set on a lens. Oh, focus peaking and stuff. Yes, that can all be programmed into U1, U2 and U3. So if you do have focus peaking set by default in one of those options and not in another option, then you can do that. Bearing in mind that focus peaking only comes on when you're using manual focus. Obviously, if you've got autofocus on, focus peaking is useless. So it doesn't. Right. So listening out to this, I don't know. I've got a few thousand shots in here, so this might go on forever. Okay, that's where the buffer filled up. It was a few seconds. Now, I should have done a scientific test and had a stopwatch, but I didn't. So now we're going to pop in a secondary battery to the NBN10. I don't know if it's going to make any difference, but we'll see. I'm just going to let that buffer clear for a minute while I'm doing that. It's quite neat, by the way. I mean, the NBN10 has a lot of criticism, of course, because it doesn't have a button on it. And I spoke to Nikon at length about the fact that it didn't have a button on it. And they said, oh, they couldn't, you know, they looked at different ways of doing it and they considered putting a Bluetooth control button on there. Honestly, I don't know what the big problem is. They could have done it, but they didn't. So whatever, we have to get over it. Right, 2 EL15B batteries in there now. No, it's about 6 seconds. It's about the same. So there's your answer. Having the second battery in there doesn't seem to make any difference to the size of the buffer. Now, bearing in mind that this is with a Sony G series card, or the equivalent, it's actually a Lexar card, but it's exactly the same speed. When we get the compact flash, let me give you that again. When we get the CF Express cards in, I imagine that those buffers will, or the size of buffer and the length of time it takes to fill up the buffer will increase dramatically, because CF Express cards are roughly about 4 times faster from what I've seen. So now we've addressed that, I'm going to go back to my original battle plan of what I was going to talk about during this. Yeah, so these are my notes for this stream. I was trying to make it really easy and really obvious. So I've talked about the AF modes. I've talked a little bit about the I button. I wanted to talk to you about the customization of the I button, which I will do now. The customization of the I button is all done through the custom settings menu. If you've already got a DSLR, you will be familiar with how that works. Let me just show you very quickly. So, menu, and then, oh, wrong way. Then down to the custom settings menu here. Doing it backwards is very exciting. And then going down to controls. And you see the option there which says customize I menu. Now, customize I menu allows you to change all of those options. So for example, let's say I didn't want to have, I'm just trying to think of what would be useful to not have here. Let's say I want to take out, so this button, sorry, going backwards is easier said than done. There we go. So this button, release mode, is copied over here in this button here, release mode. So let's say we don't want that. Instead, I want it to be peaking highlights. That's a useful function if you're going to ever do manual focus, actually, or if you're going to shoot video, it's also very useful. So I've stuck peaking highlights there. Now, when I go to that I menu here, then I've got the peaking highlights on. I have to go backwards to what I'm used to going to. There we go. The front wheel actually controls the color of the peak, and the back wheel, let's just put it on first. That would be really good. So I can choose how sensitive I want it to be. And then I can also choose what color I want it to be. So some people are particularly hypersensitive to certain colors, and other people are selective color blind, which means that they don't see in reds or blues or greens. So having the peaking highlights available as 4 different colors is a thing that I didn't think would be useful until I met a few photographers who have that exact problem. And it is actually so good that it's able to be incorporated into this, because although it's a part of the D850, there aren't many cameras that have peaking highlights. And originally peaking highlights was something that you could only ever see in red. And if you were colorblind to red, then effectively that would be completely useless. So I like the accessibility of that. So that's how you customize the eye menu. Now, I'm just periodically checking back on the comments here, because I want to just make sure you're very welcome on all those questions that I answered. So, which mirrorless camera for wedding photography? Now, here is the ultimate question. I would personally say the Z6. I used the D750 for 4 years for weddings and event photography, and I never had any complaints. I also used a D4 for a long time. I now use a D850. And the last wedding I did back in the summer, I used the D850 and the D4S side by side. And to be honest, the D850 was phenomenal. I used the D4S because I needed to have a second body, but most of the time the D850 became the camera I used. The main reason for that was the autofocus speed and also just the sheer quality of the pictures. However, if I could have had a D850 body and speed of focus, but with 24 megapixels, it would have saved my editing time tremendously. Yes, so thank you for that question, but my simple answer is I would say the Z6. Speed of focus is faster, low light performance is better than the Z7, just in terms of high ISOs. If you're in churches or in wedding venues that won't allow you to use flash or are particularly dingy, then having the low light performance is fantastic. And also the slightly lower resolution, unless you are planning to aggressively crop, the 24 megapixels is more than enough. You can print, I've had some brides and grooms print out 24 megapixel files easily A1 size. I don't know why you'd want to print a picture of yourself that big, but maybe you would. But that's completely possible with a Z6. So I would say Z6 for most things. If you would like to support us, do send us a message on Super Chat. You can see if you can post comments, and also there's a Super Chat option on our stream. So if you want to support our efforts, then please do that from the comfort of your own home. So that covers that question. If you have any other questions, please do just send them. I'll check back with them periodically, and in the meantime try and stick with my bullet points as best I can. It's okay, I can see them. Right, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was the electronic viewfinder. Now, a lot of people who are used to using a DSLR will find it perhaps a little bit counterintuitive to look at a live feed of their pictures, which is essentially what you're doing when you look at an electronic viewfinder. The EVF on the Zs is particularly good. I had Fuji cameras for a while, and I'm not saying anything bad about them, but I could not get on with the EVF. I just found it was felt too artificial, felt a little bit too much like I was looking at a little tiny television. Whereas with the Z6 and Z7, it doesn't lag. So it's not distracting. And the benefit of having an electronic viewfinder and also this live screen on the back is what you see is what you get. So in terms of exposure and in terms of knowing what your photo is going to look like at the end of the shoot, once you press that button, you can already see it before you even take the picture, which means less memory card space taken up with useless pictures, but it also means that you can adjust and refine and tweak your settings before you've even started taking a photo. One thing about the EVF is this. Now, a lot of people don't notice it, but this right here, this tiny little rectangle above the EVF is an eye sensor. So when I put my hand over it, the camera thinks that my eye is up against the viewfinder. The button on the side here allows you to change your various modes. So we've got monitor only, then it switches to automatic display, and then each one alternates to viewfinder only. The problem with having the automatic display switch is that if you get a little bit of dirt in there, and it can literally be like a tiny piece of dust, but if you get a little bit of dirt in there, then your back screen won't come on automatically. So first thing that I tell anyone who's struggling with their back screen or their EVF is to just clean it. So all you need is a little cotton bud. I thought I had one, but I don't think I do. But you know what a cotton bud looks like. And you just swab it slightly. You can do it without any solution. Better to do it with a dry cotton bud more than anything else. And just literally wipe in there. And then that will get rid of any dirt so that you get the display switch back. One of the first things we get asked quite a lot. Thank you. There we go. So here's one I made earlier. So you quite literally just clean that. I think we did a brief video on that at one point, actually, because we had quite a lot of questions. But I still get asked it, so I thought it would be worth mentioning. But apart from that, the electronic viewfinder is super handy. Now, could you tell us about what you personally would set your function buttons to, particularly with firmware 3.0, since we lose one? Well, now, the function buttons are still customizable. So although your function 2 button is by default your AF settings, you can change it to whatever you want it to. I personally find not going into the menus to change my focusing points is very useful. I cannot stand going into menus to change focusing points. It reminds me too much of when I had a D200. That was a long time ago. A D100 even. But I would say function 2, because that's where your ring finger is, and when you're holding the camera and you've got your eye to the viewfinder, you can very quickly just push that button and use your front and back wheels to toggle between your AF points. Function 1, I tend to set, I'm a super geek, so I use manual focus lenses, and I use it to have a choice of what manual focus lens I'm going to put on my camera. So on my D850, for example, my function button is actually set to that as well, because obviously it's a different setup, but non-CPU lens data, and then I can just scroll between which lens I'm choosing. That's a very niche use for a function button, but that's what I tend to use. What you could potentially use it for, if you do, because ISO is so easy to find, it's literally right there. You no longer need to worry about auto ISO, because you just toggle it on and off. You push that button and the front wheel toggles auto on and off, the back wheel manually changes your ISO. So the only other thing that I would change fairly regularly, depending on what shoot I'm doing, is probably the white balance. So perhaps the white balance for function 2, if that's useful for you. I know a few other people who have it set to slightly more obscure things. In fact, I will just give you a very brief rundown of the options here. So if you're shooting display, no, controls, customize, not that one, sorry. Let's go back one step. So customize command dials. It's not customize command dials. Custom controls, I get there eventually, they all sound the same. Function 2, F2 of the controls menu allows you to change all of the different buttons on your camera. You can change everything. You can change your, what your shutter button does if you wanted to. So function 1 is set to, on this camera, white balance. So you push function 1 and then you rotate the dial to change your white balance. Function 2 is by default set to the AF modes. Then you can change your AF on and your little multi-selector here and your movie. You can change everything. I mean, it's unbelievable. Also, when you've got a snazzy lens like a 24-70 f2.8, which has its own function button, you can also change what that button does, if you can see that there. It's like customizable. It's just unbelievable. So I would change, I'd change it to white balance for most things, but me personally, I change it to the manual focus lenses, because I have about 6 lenses that I use on heavy rotation, and avoiding going into menus is always my favorite thing to do. I can't stand menus. Hopefully that answers your question. If you have any other questions similar to that, let me know. I will talk briefly on the subject of, let me just see. So I have a customization of controls, AF modes. Okay, so now AF on, by default, AF on back here does your autofocus, but so does the shutter button. On some cameras, you have to turn it off in 2 places. With D850, D780, Z6, Z7, you've just got to do one thing. So if you do want to disable the shutter button for your autofocus, then there's one place you have to go. So we've got the menu here. Let's go up to autofocus, and then we've got AF activation, and then you've got the choice between having both shutter and AF on or AF on only. And then that means that your shutter button does not autofocus, only the AF on button does. And you can see, well, see my ear here. I'm a bit close, to be honest, but anyway. So that will allow you to use your AF on for focus, and then that just literally takes the photo. That was a rubbish picture of my ear. I'm going to format this memory card immediately and at once. So hopefully that's useful. If you have any other questions about custom functions or customizable options on the Z6 or Z7, let me know. I'm going to take the NBN10 off now because it makes the camera a bit cumbersome. So one thing I did want to show you though was that if you are doing a constant recording and you need to check the life of your batteries, then you can literally just, you push this button, this little check button, and it tells you which battery has full life and which doesn't. So the main use for the battery grip, to be quite honest, is for video recording or long days of shoots where you just want a hot swap. So you leave one fully charged battery in, you take the other battery out, stick it on charge, put another battery in. You cannot use the battery while you're charging it. So it doesn't work in the same way as an AC adapter does. If you need an AC adapter, it's a slightly different setup. It's the same setup as with any DSLR that takes the ENEL 15 batteries, the 15 generation of batteries. Another point worth mentioning, ENEL 15s come in, there's 3 versions. There's 3 versions, but there's 2 versions of the first version. Get ready for this. So ENEL 15, when it first came out, way back when the D7000 came out, this was because lithium content in Japan changed quite dramatically. Japan and China, they decided that the old ENEL 3 batteries, if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a history lesson. The old batteries that went with the D300, D700, all those D200, D100, they were very high lithium content, which means they last forever. I mean, honestly, we have lithium ion ENEL 3Es from 15 years ago, and they still are fully charged at their highest capacity. So after various natural disasters and tsunamis and things like that, Nikon had to change the content of lithium in their batteries, which was why we ended up with ENEL 15s, just to give us a completely different number. So the first version of ENEL 15 was the battery for a long time, and then when the D750 came out, they just slightly changed it. So on the back of the battery there, can you see that says lithium ion, or Li ion 20? Yes, I will. So the Li ion 20 batteries, it used to say Li ion 01. So those are the really old ones. The 20s were the newer ones. Then when the D850 came out, we got ENEL 15B, A, B, C. Now we've got 4 versions of the battery. They all work in the Z7. All of them. You could use a battery from the D7000. However, the capacities have changed slightly, and more importantly, the only one that will actually recharge in the camera is the ENEL 15B, which is this dark grey colour one. Did I say C at some point? Scrap that. If I said C, it was wrong. Just getting confused. So you can use them all also in the battery grip, but again, you cannot charge them in the grip, nor can you charge them in the camera unless you've got the ENEL 15Bs, which are the current version. So please don't try and charge older versions of batteries in the camera because it might explode. That's a good warning for you. I'm going to put this battery back in just so that I'm not carrying such a heavy camera. I want to thank all the people that are talking to us on Super Chat. Thank you to Sarfaraz Hussein Merchant. Thank you so much for your support. Also, thank you to Samuel Plural Rosales. That's my best Spanish accent. And thank you to Fatini Tassiopoulos. Thank you to all you people for supporting us. We really, really appreciate it, and it's great to have you here. Hope you're keeping we're keeping you company in this on this fine March day. If you have any questions, please, as I keep saying, please do send them to me. I'm happy to answer them as I go along. I've been talking about the MBN10, and yes, it did receive a lot of criticism when it first came out because of the lack of button. But as it is, this is what it looks like. And it's a very simple piece of kit. And I suppose the price reflects what it does. Nikon probably could have made it the same price as an MB D18, which is like 350 odd pounds. That's the one for the D850, in which case they should have put a button on it. But this is about 150, I think, and kind of reflects what it does, is effectively a place to put your spare battery. So there we go. So 2 batteries, how many shots can you take with the EVF switched on? Yeah, so with 2 batteries, it basically just doubles your battery life. So the what they call the SEPA ratings, I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but the people that decide how many shots you can take actually was super conservative. They said it was less than 1,000 on a single charge. EVF switched on uses less battery life than the back screen. So if you are trying to get as much out of your battery life as possible, then the EVF is actually less draining than the screen on the back. Other things that drain battery are VR. So if you don't need VR, then switch off. And also obviously video recording, that uses a tremendous amount of battery. I have found on a single battery, I can get 2,000 shots out of a Z6. But I'm only using the EVF and I'm using manual focus lenses. So the camera's not particularly working very hard. With the kit 24-70 f4, I think I managed to get it was about 1,200 at the most. And that was shooting most of the day, but with no flash or any external things draining power. If you have airplane mode off, so you've got the Bluetooth going, then it will drain easily in about 500 shots, particularly if you're doing that constant transfer to your phone or to your tablet. Even my D850, which is a little bit more economic on the battery use, if I leave airplane mode off, so if I leave it kind of able to connect and it sits in my camera bag and it doesn't do anything, it drains in a week just sitting there doing nothing. So if you're not going to use it, turn airplane mode on so that you don't have to drain the battery unnecessarily. Frankenstein's spirit. So Troglodyte Lensman. I love the battery grip, but it does look like Frankenstein's boot. It does a bit. It's a very strange thing. Hello from Japan. Hello from London. Thank you for joining us. And thank you so much for all your lovely comments. It's really nice to see that we have company. Yeah, the grip is an interesting one because back in the day when I had a D100, just a long time ago, the grip looked essentially like this. I was quite used to seeing battery grips like this. And then when they started doing the sleek design without this extra thing, it was so much nicer to use because you didn't have to take things off. You didn't have to remove the door and accidentally break the hinges and stuff. So this is a bit of an odd one, but the reason is so that people can hot swap the batteries. That's the only reason it looks like this. It's strange, but it's true. I have to take a momentary coffee break. Please post some questions while I'm drinking my coffee, which is going cold steadily.
Tell us about London today. How was it?
London. Okay, so yesterday London was very quiet, but it was beautiful because blue skies. We went out and took some photos. I am currently writing a review on the F6, believe it or not. Why? Because I like it. By far one of my favourite film cameras. I don't own one. I was very kindly loaned one from the shop. My film camera is an FM3A, But I had a roll of film in an F6 that I wanted to use, and it was a beautiful day outside, and we went out. Streets weren't empty, but Victoria Station was a bit quiet. For those of you who don't know where we are located 8 minutes from one of the busiest commuter stations in London. London Victoria was not deserted, but it was much less busy than usual. Whereas today there were slightly more people, so it's all a bit strange, really. The cafes are moderately empty, but they're not closed, which is good because we all need to get our coffee and lunch. It's very important. As long as we have a really nice bakery, like 4 or 5 doors down from the shop, which we frequent very often, Gale's Bakery. So if you've been to the area, or if you want to come and visit us and you need a really good cup of coffee and some of their chocolate sourdough, then that's the place to go. It's amazing. Anyway, enough of my TripAdvisor review of the Pimlico area. So why the F6? Well, I'll tell you why. So the F6, I don't have one here now. I have one downstairs. The F6 is the only AF. Yeah, you can grab one and I'll display it. Yeah, it's a second-hand one, yeah. The F6 is the only AF 35mm body DSLR, SLR, that is still being made today. Leica still make a manual 35mm camera, and obviously you've got the medium format and the large format guys who are just, it's a completely different thing. You have to sell off a body part to buy one of those, or I would anyway. The F6 is still a very obtainable price. It works with all of Nikon's AFS-G lenses, with the manual focus lenses, not the pre-AI because of the the little prong doesn't move out of the way. So if you put a pre-AI lens on there, you might damage it. But most of my lenses are actually modified. So thank you. This is an F6. This is the one we have in our second-hand department at the moment. It is built like a tank. I actually looked at the weight of it when I first took it out with me. It weighs more than the D850. If you put a battery and a card and a lens on the D850, then obviously that's going to weigh more. But the camera on its own is it's a solid piece of metal. And I really love the design of it. It feels very much like a DSLR. So it's not, if you're going for the true retro experience, like really want to go old school, then the F6 is not retro. It's for if you're doing street photography, or if you're doing something which requires maybe a little bit more automation. The metering system in the F6, I know this is people that are joining now are going to be like, what's she talking about? I'm talking about an F6, not a Z6. The metering system in here is the same as the D2, which sounds like a really old meter because it is from 2005, 3, 4, 5. I've forgotten. Early noughties. But for a film camera, that's amazing. And the last few rolls of film that I've shot with this have been perfectly exposed. So anyway, that's why the F6. This is a really long, boring answer to your question, but thank you for the question, Andy. So I'm just gonna, just for the pure satisfaction of it, that is the sound of the shutter. Let's do a fast one. And there, you use a whole roll of film just like that. So, all right, it's a really nice camera. That's why I'm doing a review of it. But that's coming out in the Nikon Owner magazine, so that's a completely separate thing to this particular stream where I was talking about the Z6. So, back to the Z6. For those who have recently joined us, I was just talking about the differences between the Z6 and DSLRs in terms of controls. I'm not talking about image quality particularly because obviously you can see on paper it's 24 megapixels. You can see how many AF points it has. You can see what the dynamic range is like from the sample images, and you can also see the ISO levels. So particularly if you're shooting in low light, you can see all of that on paper. I'm just talking about the buttons. So I'm just checking the comments while I go because I have covered quite a lot already. So do you find, this is from John, do you find the Z cameras get too small compared with the DSLRs? Now, that's an interesting thing. Most photographers are trying to downsize, I've found. There are very few, except for the real travelers and the guys that are shooting, guys and girls, I should say, shooting on the side of football pitches and sports fields, they want a robust camera because they know they're going to have to shoot whether it's raining or whether it's, you know, windy or whatever. But for most sort of, I wouldn't want to say amateur cameras, but enthusiast photographers, you want something that isn't going to break your neck. I mean, I've traveled through parts of Europe with D750s, D850s. I've traveled through the US with these cameras, and I do find them heavy. I won't deny it. My husband tells me that I need to see a chiropractor because I was carrying heavy bags of camera equipment, which is why it's always a little bit of a relief when I get to bring something that's a bit smaller. I have like a little tiny compact film camera, which I love to pieces, which comes with me pretty much everywhere, and it weighs nothing. So in terms of weight, the Z6 and Z7 really cut things down. If you're looking at body size, actually, the grip is very comfortable. If you've got large hands, I don't have particularly large hands. I don't have tiny hands, but I don't have huge hands. If you've got large hands, you will find that not having a larger grip means that your fingers kind of slip off the base here. But overall, it's still very robust. And if you can put one in your hands, if you can't come into the shop, but you can still get to the Nikon school, or you can get to any other camera shop just to put it in your hands. If you're not sure, you are going to find that it's actually quite solid. It's also made of metal, so it's not plasticky. It's not like a little compact camera where it falls out of your hands because it's too light. Hopefully that answers that question. Andy wanted to see the back of the F6, so I'm going to just do that quickly because that's what I'm here for. So here is the back of the F6. As you can see, it's got a large information display. Although this doesn't have film in it at the moment, what this normally, actually this one has had the clock reset. So let's just do that. There we go. So it normally shows you the ISO, the focus points, and then it also tells you what custom settings you've got programmed in there. You've got this slightly odd little flap here, which allows you to access this set of buttons down here. Menu, your manual ISO control, and the info button if you want to change the display. The F6 can tell you how many rolls of film it's taken. It actually records that. You can reset it, but it's quite useful if you yourself are interested how many rolls of film you've shot for a project, then you can store that. The other thing that I love about this camera, I'm going to talk about the F6 again. I digress. The other thing I love about this is that it will record shooting data on the sides of your negative. So in between the frames, you can actually see the focal length, the aperture, the shutter speed, and the exposure compensation used, which for me is very useful, particularly when documenting stuff for articles, so that I can basically, for an article, I can go, this shot was taken using this lens and this aperture, etc. So that's what the back of the F6 looks like. I hope that helps. Maybe I'll do a live stream on the subject of the F6 next. So are the Z lens weights, oh, I can't read all that comment. Let's try that again. Are the Z lenses weight the same? I'm guessing, so John's question here, are the Z lenses weighed the same? The Z lenses vary a little bit. So to talk you through the lineup, we've got a 20mm coming out, hopefully next month now, I guess, because the due date for it was yesterday and it didn't arrive. So that's the 21.8. The 20, the 24, and the 20 and the 24 1.8s are about the same size and weight as the F-mount lenses, the Gs, the 1.8 Gs. The 35 1.8 is bigger, slightly, than the 35 1.8 G, but it is smaller and lighter than the 1.4. That's the case with most of them. The only one that really throws an odd curve is the 50mm. Would you mind grabbing the primes just so that I can... the 50s, the Z prime, sorry. The 50 1.8 is slightly bigger than all of the 50mm for the F mount. There's a couple of reasons for that. It is, when you look at the optical design, it is optically superior. What's that one? That's a 50. So you can see from just the size it is in my hands that it's quite large. It's not, the normal 50mm is about this big. So it's a little bit bigger. And also it's a 62mm diameter. on the front. I've done loads of unboxing videos, so you might have seen the comparison there. But that's the size difference. In terms of quality, however, the 1.8 Z lens has a superior optical design to the 1.4 and the 1.8. Now, the 50mm 1.4G came out back in about 2008, I believe. I'm trying to remember because that's how long I've been here for. but it came out then. And it was the first AFS prime that Nikon did as a kind of refresh of the range. And I found that the AFS lens focused slightly slower than the AFD 51.4. I mean, it was like fractions of a second, but it was noticeable. The 51.8, which is the same physical construction in terms of mechanics there, you can see it. It's about the same size. It's slightly lighter, faster to focus than the 1.4G, and at apertures above f2.8, they're effectively the same. The 1.8 is sharp wide open. Sorry, the Z 1.8 is sharp wide open, pretty much across the frame. That seems to be the case with all of the Z lenses. All of the Z lenses, the primes, I should say, are all about this size. And they're all a kind of similar size and weight. You know, they bob around the sort of 500 gram, 600 gram weight, certainly lighter than the zooms. So then we've got the 20 to arrive. We've got the 24, the 35, the 50, the 85. Those are all the primes. And then we've got the 14 to 30 wide angle zoom, the 24 to 70 f4, which is the one that's on here that normally comes in a kit, 24-70 2.8, and soon to arrive the 70 to 200 2.8 and the 24 to 200. Now, so thank you for that question. Hopefully that answers it for you. Thank you for all your comments so far. It's really, really appreciated. And thank you so much for your support. If you are happy to support us or interested in supporting us, then you can do on Super Chat. You should be able to see that on the right-hand side. My right, also your right. Right-hand side of the frame. Thank you to everyone who has supported us so far on the stream. It's really appreciated. I hope you're enjoying the stream so far. If you have any questions about the Zs or any DSLRs or any film cameras or any lenses, you know, I'm here to answer them because we've diverted from just a Z6 chat to all kinds of things now. It's great. So let's have a look. And we've got another comment. I'm going to try and keep track of the comments here. So, any plans for a teleconverter? Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if they did a teleconverter? Just to talk a little bit about teleconverters, Nikon don't make converters that will overly compromise the quality of a lens. So their principle had always been that if it was going to slow down the lens too much or degrade the optical quality too much, then it wasn't going to be compatible. So as it stands, and I think Constantine and I have done a video which is about to come out, is it? It's about this week on our channel with some frequently asked questions. One of the frequently asked questions is about teleconverters. So you can use F-mount converters on compatible F-mount lenses on the FTZ, on the Z cameras. There's a long description. I mean, that makes the setup quite big. But in terms of a Z teleconverter, knowing Nikon, they would probably only make it compatible with the same kind of lenses. So for example, the 70 to 200 2.8. But because the roadmap already has telephoto lenses on there, and I mean, we've got, I think, at least 2 more telephoto lenses. We've got, I think, a 100 to 300 and a 300 to 600 off the top of my head on the lens lineup chart. So because they've already got those in the pipeline, I believe that they would probably concentrate on releasing the lenses before a teleconverter, just because they've never been one to bring out converters for shorter lenses. That doesn't mean that another brand won't, though. The Nikon lenses that don't take a teleconverter, Nikon teleconverter, I should say, do have compatible converters made by companies like Kenko. So if you've got a 70 to 300 or what's the other one? 55 to 300, or some of those smaller zooms which won't autofocus with a converter. There are companies like Kenko who still make one that works. Hopefully that answers that question. But the simple answer is no, I don't think so immediately. Thank you for your question, Rick. Right, I am gonna call it a day on this, but I am going to keep an eye on the comments for the stream, and also if you check out our other YouTube videos, if you have any specific questions to do with any of the topics there, we have videos on the subject of manual focus, cameras and lenses. We do have videos on the Zeds. If you want us to cover something very specific, let us know, because we're always looking for more ideas. Our latest video series has to do with buying secondhand equipment, because a lot of people don't need to buy or want to buy brand new equipment, and they're quite happy to buy secondhand. So we've started videoing some guidelines for you. So if you have any other questions, pop them in the comments. If you also need something a little bit more niche, you can always email us. So myself and a couple of my colleagues always monitor the emails coming in. So if you have a question for me or anyone else in the technical department, it's just info@graysofwestminster.co.uk. It's super easy to get hold of us. You can also get us through Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, you know, we're everywhere. We are omnipotent. Right, so I'm going to call it a day. Thank you so much, guys, for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. And keep well, and we'll see you very soon.